Marcus wiped the grease from his hands with a torn cloth, squinting at the massive crystalline structure that dominated the center of the alien facility. The other species called it the Vault of Eternal Binding, but, to Marcus, it just looked like the galaxy's most complicated engine problem. After 3 months of working on this backwater mining station, he had seen plenty of weird alien technology, but nothing quite like this. The Zephyrian overseer, Calthax, approached with his usual mixture of nervous energy and condescension. His blue-scaled face twisted into what passed for a smile among his people, though Marcus had learned it usually meant trouble. "Human Marcus," Calthax said, his translator device rendering his words in flat, mechanical tones. "The Council has decided to grant you access to the inner chambers of the vault. Your unique perspectives on mechanical systems may prove useful." Marcus raised an eyebrow. In the 3 months since arriving at mining station Zirion 7, he had been relegated to fixing water recyclers and atmospheric processors. The other species treated human engineering like a curious hobby rather than serious science. Now they wanted his help with their most sacred artifact? "What's the catch?" Marcus asked, setting down his tools. Calthax's scales shifted to a darker blue, a sign of discomfort. "The containment systems have begun to fail. Energy fluctuations are increasing daily. Our best engineers cannot determine the cause." Marcus looked at the massive crystal formation again. It rose nearly 50 meters into the air, pulsing with an inner light that seemed almost alive. Energy conduits snaked around its base like metallic vines, feeding into machines that hummed with barely contained power. "And what exactly are you containing in there?" The question seemed to startle Calthax. His gill slits fluttered rapidly. "You do not know? Has no one told you of Pyraxis? Should I know that name?" Calthax looked around nervously, as if speaking the name might summon something terrible. Pyraxis is the last of the guardian dragons. For over 10,000 years, she has been imprisoned within the vault. She was captured during the Dragon Wars, when the guardian species nearly destroyed half the galaxy in their rage. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard whispers about the Dragon Wars in cantinas and trading posts, but most species treated it like ancient mythology. Dragons were supposed to be extinct, wiped out in some cosmic conflict before humans even discovered fire. A real dragon? Like, breathing fire and everything? Fire? Calthax made a sound that might have been laughter. "Human, you understand so little. Guardian dragons do not breathe fire. They breathe reality itself. They can unmake matter with a thought, bend space with their will, and their anger can shatter entire solar systems. Pyraxis alone destroyed the homeworlds of 3 species before she was finally contained." Marcus stared at the crystal structure with new understanding. The energy readings, the massive containment systems, the fear in every alien's voice when they looked at it. They weren't just containing a creature. They were containing a living weapon of mass destruction. "So why do you want a human poking around in there?" Calthax's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a dull gray. "Because our methods are failing. The containment field weakens daily. If Pyraxis breaks free, she will remember the 10,000 years of imprisonment. Her revenge will be..." He paused, searching for words. "Complete." Marcus walked closer to the vault, feeling the hair on his arms stand up from the electromagnetic fields surrounding it. The crystal wasn't just beautiful, it was functional. Each facet seemed designed to redirect and contain energy, like the most sophisticated capacitor he had ever seen. But there were flaws in the design, inefficiencies that made his engineer's brain itch. "Your people built this?" "Not my people. This is architect technology, from the species that originally defeated the guardian dragons. The architects have been extinct for 3,000 years. We merely maintain their work. But you don't really understand how it works." Calthax's silence was answer enough. Marcus approached one of the control panels, noting the alien symbols and crystalline interfaces. The technology was elegant but overcomplicated, like someone had designed a watch by starting with the entire universe. Typical alien engineering, in his opinion. They could build something that lasted 10,000 years, but they couldn't fix it when it broke.
What happens if I can't fix it?
Then, we evacuate the station and detonate our largest antimatter charges inside the vault, hoping to destroy both the containment and the prisoner before she can escape.
And if that doesn't work? Kelfax's scales turned almost black.
Then, we run, and hope she chooses to destroy someone else first. Marcus studied the readouts on his portable scanner, noting energy patterns that seemed almost organic in their complexity. The containment field wasn't just holding something in, it was actively fighting against something that was pushing back with increasing force.
How long do you think we have?
Perhaps a week.
Maybe less.
Marcus nodded slowly, already forming theories about the containment system's weaknesses. Human technology might be primitive by galactic standards, but it had one advantage: it was designed to be understood, modified, and fixed by the people who used it. This architect technology was beautiful, but it was also a black box that no one had successfully opened in 3 millennia. I'll need complete access to all your technical records, every sensor reading you've taken in the last year, and a team of assistants who won't ask questions about what I'm doing.
You believe you can succeed where the greatest minds in the galaxy have failed?
Marcus grinned, the expression apparently confusing Kelfax based on his rapidly shifting scale colors.
You know what your problem is?
You're all trying to maintain something you don't understand.
But I'm not going to maintain it.
I'm going to figure out how it really works, and then I'm going to fix it properly. As Marcus began his preliminary examination of the vault's outer systems, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Not by Kelfax or the other station personnel, but by something else entirely. Something that had been waiting in the crystal depths for 10,000 years, growing stronger and angrier with each passing day. The first thing Marcus noticed when he accessed the technical records was how wrong everyone's assumptions had been.
The containment field wasn't designed to simply hold a prisoner. It was designed to drain something from the prisoner, slowly and continuously, for millennia.
What exactly has this thing been doing to the dragon? He asked Kelfax during their evening briefing. Containing her essence, preventing her from manifesting her full power. No, that's not what these energy signatures indicate.
Marcus pulled up a holographic display showing power flows throughout the system. This isn't just containment. This is harvesting. Kelfax's scales went pale. Harvesting what? Energy. Raw creative force, if I'm reading this correctly. The dragon isn't just a prisoner.
She's been a battery for 10,000 years, powering who knows what throughout the galaxy. The revelation hung in the air like a physical weight. Marcus continued his analysis, noting how the energy extracted from the dragon had been channeled into the station's main power grid and, beyond, feeding into subspace transmission networks that span multiple sectors. Your entire civilization, Marcus said quietly, has been powered by torturing this creature.
Kelfax backed away from the display as if it might contaminate him.
That's impossible. The vault is merely a prison. The architects were heroes who saved the galaxy from destruction.
Were they? Or were they the ones who figured out how to weaponize dragons instead of just fighting them?
Marcus spent the next 2 days diving deeper into the vault systems, learning how to interface human computers with architect technology. What he found disturbed him more each hour. The dragon wasn't just being drained of energy, she was being slowly dissolved, her very essence converted into power for a galactic network that had grown dependent on her suffering.
But something else became clear as he studied the containment patterns. The dragon was learning.
After 10,000 years of imprisonment, she had begun to understand the system that held her.
The recent fluctuations weren't signs of containment failure.
They were signs that the prisoner was becoming smarter than her prison. On the third night, as Marcus worked alone in the depths of the facility, something changed. The crystal began to pulse with a different rhythm, and, suddenly, he could hear something that made his blood freeze. A voice. Ancient, powerful, and filled with unimaginable fury.
You are not like the others, small one.
Marcus spun around, but he was alone with the crystal. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, resonating in his bones rather than his ears.
You can hear me because you understand what they have done. You see the truth they have hidden from themselves for millennia. You're the dragon, Marcus whispered. I am Pyraxis, last guardian of the deep dark, and I have been awake for every moment of 10,000 years. I have felt every joule of energy torn from my essence, experienced every second of this endless theft. And, now, finally, someone has arrived who might understand what justice truly means. Marcus looked at his scanner readings, noting how the containment field fluctuated with each word the dragon spoke. She was using their conversation to probe the system's weaknesses, learning from his presence in ways that 10 millennia of solitude hadn't allowed. If I free you, what happens to everyone on this station? That depends entirely on what you choose to do, human. I can sense your thoughts, your intentions. You are not like the others. You actually care about right and wrong, even when it costs you. Marcus stared at the crystal, understanding that he stood at a crossroads that would affect the entire galaxy. The dragon wasn't lying, he could somehow sense her sincerity, along with her rage and her pain. But he could also sense something else, hope. For the first time in 10,000 years, Pyraxis had hope. What do you want me to do? Free me, and I will show this galaxy what happens when you build your paradise on another being's suffering. But I will not harm those who had no part in creating this abomination. I can sense the guilt in you, human. You know the difference between justice and revenge. Marcus made his decision. Not because he trusted the dragon completely, but because he knew that keeping her imprisoned was fundamentally wrong, regardless of the consequences. He began accessing the deepest levels of the containment system, using his growing understanding of architect technology to unlock safeguards that had held for millennia. As the first containment layer began to dissolve, Pyraxis's voice grew stronger, more real. What is your name, small one? I would know the identity of my liberator. Marcus. Marcus Chan. I fix things for a living. Marcus Chan, fixer of things. When I am free, I will remember your kindness. But, first, you should understand what I truly am. The others call me the last guardian dragon, but that is only part of the truth. I am the last guardian of reality itself. My kind were not destroyers. We were protectors. And this galaxy has been unprotected for far too long. As more containment layers fell away, Marcus began to sense the true scope of what he was releasing. The dragon wasn't just powerful, she was connected to fundamental forces that shaped space and time itself. Her imprisonment hadn't just been cruel, it had left the galaxy vulnerable to threats that most species couldn't even comprehend. The final containment barrier dissolved just as alarms began blaring throughout the station. Marcus stepped back as the crystal began to crack, light pouring through the fissures with increasing intensity. But, instead of the explosion of rage and destruction he expected, something else happened. The light condensed, taking shape slowly and deliberately. Not the massive reptilian form he had imagined, but something far more complex and beautiful. Pyraxis stood before him as a being of shifting energy and matter, sometimes appearing almost human, sometimes revealing glimpses of scales and wings that seemed to extend into dimensions he couldn't fully perceive. Thank you, Marcus Chan, she said, her voice now spoken rather than projected into his mind. Now let me show you what your people call humanity has that the rest of this galaxy has forgotten. The dragon turned toward the exit of the vault, and Marcus realized that everything he thought he knew about the universe was about to change forever. The Guardians awakening the station's emergency klaxons wailed as Pyraxis emerged from the shattered remains of her crystal prison. Marcus watched in fascination as the dragon's form stabilized into something that seemed almost human, though energy rippled beneath her translucent skin like contained lightning. She stood barely taller than Marcus himself, but the space around her seemed to bend slightly, as if reality was making room for something far larger than her physical appearance suggested. Kelthax burst into the chamber with a squad of security personnel, their weapons already charged and aimed. When they saw the empty crystal shell and the figure standing beside Marcus, several of them fell to their knees in terror. What have you done? Kelthax whispered, his scales cycling rapidly through colors Marcus had never seen before. Pyraxis turned her attention to the Zephyrian overseer, and her expression grew cold. I remember you, Kelthax of the Outer Streams.
Your ancestor, Kelfax I, was present when I was captured. He stood and watched as they bound me in this torture device, and he called it justice.
Marcus stepped between them, raising his hands.
Wait. He didn't know what the containment system really did.
None of them did.
The dragon's gaze shifted to Marcus, and, for a moment, her expression softened.
You defend them, even now. This is what I sensed in you, human.
Compassion, even for those who would see you as inferior. They're afraid, Marcus said. 10,000 years of stories about guardian dragons destroying worlds.
They think you're going to kill everyone.
Pyraxis looked around the chamber, taking in the faces of the terrified aliens. When she spoke, her voice carried impossible harmonics that seemed to resonate in multiple dimensions. I will not lie to you, Kelfax of the outer streams. Part of me wants to unmake every world that benefited from my suffering. Part of me wants to show your species what 10,000 years of agony feels like. The security team's weapons began charging up, but Pyraxis simply looked at them and the energy dissipated harmlessly.
But I am not what you have made me out to be in your stories.
I am a guardian, not a destroyer. My rage is real, but it will be focused where it belongs. Marcus felt a strange sensation, as if the dragon was sharing something with him through their proximity. Suddenly, he could sense the vast network of energy conduits that had been feeding off Pyraxis for millennia, stretching across multiple star systems like a web of stolen power. He could feel the weight of civilizations that had grown and prospered while remaining completely ignorant of the suffering that fueled their expansion. The energy grid, Marcus said, understanding flooding through him. It powers everything. Trade routes, communication networks, even some of the terraforming projects.
Pyraxis nodded.
The architects were clever. They convinced the galaxy that they had found an unlimited clean energy source. No one asked where it came from, because no one wanted to know.
It was easier to believe in miracles than to question them. Kelfax's weapon dropped from his nerveless fingers. Our entire civilization, everything we've built, was built on slavery, Pyraxis finished.
But not your slavery, Kelfax. You are also victims of the architect's deception. The question now is what we do with this knowledge. Marcus watched as the dragon moved through the chamber, her footsteps leaving no trace but somehow changing the fundamental nature of the space she occupied. He could sense her examining the station's systems, understanding in moments what had taken him days to learn. The network extends to over 40 star systems, she said. Billions of beings whose lives depend on energy that was stolen from me. I cannot simply destroy it without condemning entire worlds to death. So what do you do? Marcus asked. Pyraxis smiled, and the expression was both terrible and beautiful. I do what guardians have always done. I protect those who cannot protect themselves, even when they don't deserve it. But, first, I must reclaim what was taken. She raised her hand, and Marcus felt reality shift around them. Power began flowing back through the network, but, instead of being drained from the dragon, it was being freely given by her. The difference was immediate and profound. Where the stolen energy had been harsh and unstable, requiring constant maintenance and safeguards, the freely given power flowed smooth and clean.
I am returning to them what they took, Pyraxis explained, but on my terms.
They will have to learn to use power responsibly, or they will lose it entirely.
Throughout the galaxy, the effects were immediate.
On worlds that had grown careless with energy, systems began shutting down until consumption dropped to sustainable levels. Civilizations that had built their expansion on endless growth found themselves forced to prioritize efficiency and conservation. But worlds that used their resources wisely found their power sources becoming more reliable and abundant than ever before. Marcus watched the data streams flowing through the station's communications array, observing the galaxy's reaction to this sudden change. Some systems were panicking, demanding to know why their energy allocations had been reduced. Others were celebrating breakthroughs in power efficiency they had never thought possible.
You're teaching them, Marcus realized.
I am giving them the opportunity to learn, Pyraxis corrected. What they do with that opportunity will determine their future.
Kelfax approached cautiously, his scales now a steady blue that Marcus recognized as a sign of deep concentration. The Council will want explanations. They will want to know how to control this new power source. Pyraxis turned to face him fully, and Marcus could see galaxies spinning in the depths of her eyes. Tell them that the power was never theirs to control. It was stolen, and now it has been returned to its rightful owner. If they wish to continue receiving it, they will need to earn it. How? By becoming worthy of it. By showing that they can use power to build rather than to dominate. By demonstrating that they understand the difference between taking and receiving. Marcus felt a vibration through the station's hull and checked his scanners. Ships were approaching, lots of them. The major galactic powers were mobilizing fleets, probably planning to demand that the Dragon return to her prison. You've got company coming, he told Pyraxis. She nodded calmly. I expected as much. They will try to force me back into containment, believing that they can return to their old ways. They will learn otherwise. The first ships to arrive were Zephyrian military vessels, sleek and heavily armed. They took positions around the station, weapons trained on the facility. Communications requests flooded in, each more demanding than the last. Marcus opened a channel to the fleet commander, a Zephyrian admiral whose scales were locked in the deep red of barely contained fury. This is Admiral Thexus of the Combined Fleet. You will immediately restore the prisoner to containment and return our power systems to normal operation. Pyraxis stepped into view of the communication screen, and Marcus watched the Admiral's expression change from anger to terror. Admiral Thexus, she said calmly, your fleet's weapons are powered by energy I have provided for the last 10,000 years. I suggest you consider that before making threats. You are a criminal and a destroyer of worlds, the Admiral replied, though his voice shook. You will submit to lawful authority. Pyraxis's expression didn't change, but Marcus felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. I am older than your species, Thexus. I remember when your people were still learning to use fire. I protected your ancestors from threats you cannot even imagine. And this is how you repay 10,000 years of involuntary service? The dragon gestured, and every weapon on every ship in the fleet simply stopped working. Not destroyed, not damaged, just inactive. I am not your prisoner, Admiral. I never was. I was your unwilling benefactor, and that relationship is now concluded. Marcus watched the fleet's reaction with a mixture of awe and terror. Ships began maneuvering frantically, trying to restore weapons that no longer functioned. Some attempted to ram the station, only to find their engines equally unresponsive. You want to see what a real guardian dragon can do? Pyraxis asked the Admiral. Very well. She extended her consciousness across space, and Marcus felt her presence expand to encompass the entire star system. Suddenly, he could sense everything, every ship, every asteroid, every particle of cosmic dust. And he could feel Pyraxis gently nudging it all into perfect harmony. The ships found their engines working again, but they could no longer approach the station aggressively. When they tried to aim weapons, the targeting systems simply refused to lock onto anything that couldn't defend itself. Pirates hiding in the system's outer reaches discovered their ships would no longer respond to commands that would harm innocent traders. This is what a guardian does, Pyraxis explained to the stunned fleet. We do not destroy unless there is no other choice. We protect, we guide, and we teach. The question is whether you are willing to learn. More fleets arrived over the following days, each representing different galactic powers. The hegemony sent dreadnoughts. The Trade Federation deployed economic warfare ships designed to disrupt entire planetary economies. The Academic Consortium brought vessels equipped with reality-warping weapons based on theoretical physics that most species couldn't even comprehend. Pyraxis dealt with each arrival the same way. She neutralized their ability to cause harm while leaving them perfectly capable of defending themselves and accomplishing peaceful goals. Ships designed for conquest found they could only be used for exploration. Weapons of mass destruction became terraforming tools. Economic warfare systems transformed into platforms for facilitating fair trade.
Marcus spent those days learning from Pyraxis, understanding how Guardian powers worked. She showed him how reality itself was more malleable than most beings realized, how consciousness could shape the fundamental forces of the universe when it was aligned with principles of protection and growth rather than domination and destruction. Your species has this potential, she told him during one of their conversations. Humans understand instinctively what many older species have forgotten. You know that true strength comes from building others up, not tearing them down. Not all of us, Marcus replied, thinking of human history's darker chapters. No, not all. But, enough. And, those humans who understand will teach the others, just as you are learning to teach me about the beauty of fixing broken things rather than simply replacing them. It was then that Marcus realized what was really happening. Pyraxis wasn't just reclaiming her stolen energy or teaching the galaxy about responsible power use. She was preparing for something bigger. Something that required the cooperation of multiple species working together toward common goals. What's coming? He asked her one evening as they watched the assembled fleets maintain their uneasy peace around the station. Pyraxis was quiet for a long moment, her form shifting through various states of matter as she considered her answer. The reason the guardian dragons existed in the first place, she finally said. The threat that we were created to stand against. It has been growing in the void between galaxies for 10,000 years, feeding on the chaos and discord that my imprisonment allowed to flourish. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. What kind of threat? The kind that doesn't just destroy civilizations or planets or star systems, Pyraxis replied. The kind that unravels the fundamental structure of reality itself, leaving nothing but void in its wake. The devourers of order, some called them. The unmakers. They are coming, Marcus, and this galaxy is not prepared to face them alone. She gestured toward the fleets surrounding the station. This is why I must teach them to work together, to share power rather than hoard it, to build rather than destroy. When the unmakers arrive, every ship, every world, every species will need to contribute their strengths. And those strengths will need to be powered by energy freely given, not stolen. Marcus understood now why the dragon had been so patient with the galaxy's military posturing. She wasn't just establishing her freedom, she was recruiting an army. An army that would need to learn to trust each other completely if they had any hope of surviving what was coming. How long do we have? He asked. Pyraxis looked out at the stars, her expression grave. Perhaps 50 years. Maybe less. The unmakers move slowly between galaxies, but their scouts have already begun probing our outer systems. They will test our defenses, looking for weaknesses to exploit. And they will find many, unless we can unite this fractured galaxy under a common cause. Marcus realized that his simple repair job had become something far greater than he had ever imagined. He wasn't just a mechanic who had freed a prisoner. He was now part of the galaxy's last hope for survival, standing beside a dragon who carried the weight of 10,000 years of injustice and the responsibility for protecting billions of lives from a threat that defied comprehension. The real work was just beginning. The Galaxy United 6 months after Pyraxis' liberation, the galaxy had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. The initial panic and military posturing had given way to something unprecedented in galactic history, cooperation born of necessity and guided by wisdom. Marcus stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Unity station, watching as ships from dozens of species worked together to build defensive platforms that would have been impossible for any single civilization to create. Zephyrian engineers collaborated with human technicians, while Architect-era technology was being reverse-engineered and improved by joint research teams that included species who had been enemies for centuries. It's working, he said to Pyraxis, who stood beside him in her preferred semi-human form, though today her scales caught the light from 3 different suns as the massive station orbited a carefully chosen neutral system. The cooperation is working, Pyraxis agreed. But the real test hasn't begun yet. As if summoned by her words, an alarm began sounding throughout the station. Marcus checked his communication device and felt his blood chill. The outer system sensors had detected something massive approaching from intergalactic space, moving at speeds that shouldn't have been possible for anything made of matter. The scouts, Pyraxis said grimly. They're earlier than I expected. Within minutes, the station's command center had become a hub of controlled chaos. Representatives from every major species in the galaxy were present, either in person or through quantum communication links. Admiral Fexus, who had become an unlikely ally after his fleet's first encounter with the Dragon, was coordinating the military response. Sensor readings indicate a vessel roughly the size of a small moon, he reported, his scales shifting to the deep blue of intense concentration. But it's not registering as solid matter. It appears to be composed of some form of organized void. Marcus had spent months learning to interface his human technology with the various alien systems, and now he was able to access the sensor data directly. What he saw defied his understanding of physics. The approaching entity wasn't just empty space, it was actively consuming space, leaving trails of absolute nothingness in its wake. It's not a ship, he realized. It's a living thing. A creature made of anti-existence. Pyraxis nodded, her expression grim. The Unmakers are not beings as we understand the term. They are anti-beings, creatures that exist by consuming existence itself. This one is small, probably just a scout as I said. But even a scout can unmake an entire star system if it's allowed to establish itself. The hegemony's war leader, a massive insectoid named Zrakth, clicked his mandibles in agitation. Our weapons are useless against void stuff. How do we fight something that doesn't exist? With existence, Pyraxis replied. With reality itself, given freely and focused through unity of purpose. This is why I needed you all to learn to work together. A single species, no matter how advanced, cannot generate enough coherent reality to stand against an unmaker. But, united. She gestured, and, suddenly, Marcus could feel it. Every consciousness on the station, every mind in the combined fleets, every soul that had chosen to stand together against the coming darkness. They were all connected now through Pyraxis's power, but the connection was voluntary, respectful, and strengthening rather than draining. Feel what Marcus feels, Pyraxis said to the assembled leaders. Understand what humans call hope. Marcus felt his emotions and thoughts being gently shared with beings across dozens of species. They experienced his wonder at their cooperation, his pride in their achievements, his absolute conviction that they could succeed if they worked together. But, more than that, they felt his very human tendency to fix broken things, to see problems as challenges rather than insurmountable obstacles. The effect was immediate and profound. The panic in the command center calmed into determined focus. Species that had been arguing about resource allocation suddenly found ways to share that benefited everyone. Military commanders who had been competing for authority began collaborating on strategies that utilized each fleet's unique strengths. Now, Pyraxis said, we show this scout what a united galaxy can do. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. Instead of weapons and shields, the combined fleets used concentrated reality itself as their primary tool. Human creativity guided Zephyrian precision engineering. Hegemony tactical doctrine was enhanced by academic consortium theoretical physics. Each species contributed their greatest strengths while the others covered their weaknesses. Marcus found himself at the center of it all, his human intuition helping to coordinate technologies that had never been designed to work together. His years of fixing broken machines had taught him to see how different systems could be combined in unexpected ways, and now he was applying that knowledge on a galactic scale. The Unmaker Scout, faced with coordinated reality projection from thousands of ships and billions of minds, found itself unable to establish the void zones it needed to feed and grow. Every time it tried to consume space, the combined fleets simply created more space to replace it. Every attempt to unmake matter was countered by spontaneous matter creation guided by unified will. But the real surprise came when the scout tried to retreat. Instead of allowing it to return to its masters with intelligence about the galaxy's defenses, Pyraxis did something that shocked everyone, including herself. She converted it. Using the power of billions of connected minds, she surrounded the Unmaker with so much concentrated existence, so much pure reality and life and hope, that the creature's fundamental nature began to change. Instead of consuming existence, it began to create it. Instead of unmaking reality, it started building new forms of matter and energy that had never existed before. That's impossible, whispered Dr. Velix, the academic consortium's chief researcher into theoretical physics. You can't change something's fundamental nature like that. You can, Pyraxis replied, though she looked as amazed as anyone else, if you have enough beings willing to believe in the possibility of change. And if you have humans to show you that impossible is just another word for hasn't been fixed yet. The converted scout, now radiating creativity instead of destruction, turned back toward intergalactic space. But, instead of returning to its masters, it began building something new in the void between galaxies. Structures of pure crystallized possibility that would serve as beacons for other unmakers, showing them that existence was more powerful than non-existence, that creation was more satisfying than destruction. Marcus watched the data streams showing the scout's transformation with a sense of awe that left him speechless. They hadn't just defeated an enemy, they had turned it into an ally. And, if they could do it once. The others will come now, Pyraxis said, reading his thoughts. All of them. The Scouts' conversion will challenge everything they believe about reality. Some will come in rage, some in curiosity, but they will all come. Are we ready? Marcus asked. Pyraxis looked around the command center, where beings from across the galaxy were already planning improvements to their defensive strategies, sharing technologies that had been secret for millennia, and forming friendships that transcended species barriers. We're becoming ready, she said. And that's what really matters. Not that we're perfect, but that we're growing, learning, becoming more than we were. Over the following months, more Unmaker Scouts arrived, and each encounter strengthened the galaxy's unity. Some were converted like the first. Others were simply convinced to leave. A few had to be actively repelled, but even these battles were fought with creation rather than destruction, building vast gardens of reality in the void that the Unmakers found impossible to approach. Marcus found himself becoming something he had never expected, a teacher. His human perspective on problem-solving was so different from galactic norms that every species wanted to learn from him. He taught Zephyrian engineers to think outside the box. He showed hegemony warriors that true strength came from building rather than conquering. He helped academic researchers understand that sometimes the most elegant solution was also the simplest one. But, more importantly, he learned from them in return. He discovered that each species had their own version of humanity's best qualities. The Zephyrians' dedication to precision was really a form of caring about details. The hegemony's warrior culture was built on protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The academic consortium's pursuit of knowledge was driven by a desire to understand and help rather than to control. Years passed. The defensive network grew stronger. The converted Unmakers began returning to their original galaxy, spreading the message of creation over destruction. And, slowly, reports began coming in from the deepest void. The Unmaker advance had stopped. They're not coming anymore, Admiral Thexus reported during one of the regular Unity Council meetings. Our deep space monitors show the main Unmaker force has actually begun retreating toward their home reality. Pyraxis smiled, and Marcus realized it was the first truly peaceful expression he had ever seen on her face. They've learned what we learned. That existence is stronger than non-existence, that building is more satisfying than destroying, that cooperation achieves more than domination. So it's over? Marcus asked. The immediate threat is over, Pyraxis agreed. But, something better has begun. Look around you, Marcus. Look what you started by simply choosing to fix something that was broken. Marcus looked at the Unity Council chamber, where species that had been enemies for millennia were now planning joint exploration missions to neighboring galaxies. He saw research teams working on technologies that would benefit everyone rather than give advantages to single civilizations. He watched as young beings from different species played together in the station's gardens, growing up in a galaxy where cooperation was normal rather than exceptional. I just fixed a containment system, he said. No, Pyraxis replied. You fixed something much more important. You fixed the idea that some beings are less valuable than others. You fixed the notion that power must be taken rather than earned. You fixed the belief that problems are meant to be endured rather than solved. She gestured toward the vast viewing window, where ships from hundreds of worlds were arriving for the first Galactic Unity Festival.
You fixed the galaxy's broken heart, Marcus Chen.
And, in doing so, you taught us all what humans know instinctively, that the most dangerous problems are also the most important opportunities. Marcus watched as the festival ships arranged themselves in a pattern that would have been beautiful to any species, but was specifically designed to honor human aesthetic principles. It was their way of acknowledging that humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy wasn't their technology or their military might, but their stubborn insistence that everything broken could be fixed if you just cared enough to try. As the celebration began and beings from across the galaxy came together to honor their shared survival and growth, Marcus realized that his simple repair job had indeed changed everything. Not through force or manipulation, but through the most human approach possible, he had seen something broken and refused to accept that it had to stay that way.
The galaxy would never be the same.
And that, Marcus thought as he watched Pyraxis dance with children from a dozen different species, was the most beautiful repair job he had ever been part of.